Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us. Today's talk is centered around the topic of creation, so I'll be delving deep into the steps from first cell in light form all the way to manifest creation. I'll talk about ascension, discuss how ascension is a natural phenomenon, not an oddity. We'll also talk about what's happening to our sun, the matrix system in terms of its own spiritual evolution. So when it comes to creation, there are 5 stages considered the pre-matter stages. Then there's fetal integration, when the being manifests itself into the physical form in the womb of the mother. So the whole concept of creation is actually understood to be that that we take birth, we age, we get sick, and pass on to the next life. Or some consider a life just that once the being dies, then that's really the end. Okay, but true ascension is actually cyclical because it doesn't culminate in death. It culminates in a return to something greater and bigger. It culminates in the return to source point and the flow back out into the new form that holds memory of all its past encryptions and imprints. It's an accretion process, it's never a loss. It's not a process of suffering, of pain, of misery. We've been made to believe that, but it's not. So today I will shed light on this and hopefully clear things up if you haven't been exposed to this kind of information before. So this information I'll be presenting today, it becomes important for anyone on the path of organic and true ascension to firstly understand what makes up the human gene code expressions and epigenetics, the subtle energy layers, the sheaths, the fields, the energy fields, anatomy, and secondly, to learn how to command the elements of power to return home to the original point of creation, to source, not to a dark place we've been made feel like, we're stuck in and helpless about. I will talk about also the prana exchange process, the sun state and where it's at. And I will talk about the evac mission or evacuation mission, also known as ascension process for Christics and humans who possess and hold the genetic keys to evolve their consciousness out of this density level. So this information may not be of interest to everybody, especially people plugged into the hive mind and matrix system. These people would rather be controlled and led. Okay, they're the ones that follow a script, not their own, within which they're denied, the liberty to question given narratives and constructs. This video I'm making is actually for empowering individuation of consciousness as well as collective consciousness to find way back home. This knowledge becomes very significant for this purpose. We evolve back to source by knowing and learning the inner technologies. So after this video, you will know why we use the sacred codes and why spiritual bio-regensis is the key for ascension. The process involves learning by listening, singing sacred songs, pineal induction, linguistic template, recoding, gazing at the sacred codes, and running correct frequencies to awaken the dormant spirit light body and recode our genetics. Now, why do we need to do this? Well, simply put, our system at the moment is run by fallen consciousness who don't want you to know about what I'm going to be talking about in this video. In other words, the truth of how we come into existence, the order, the structure behind the formation of our body anatomy and the multiple layers that form the morphogenetic field, and the truth about source, the all-pervading consciousness, it's not the same as the source the religious institutions push pertaining to the pantheons of gods, demanding worship and sacrifice. This is different, okay? Today I'll explain this information from the sacred plates. It's called the CDT plates. I'll explain the process of creation, And this information is not my own. It's interpreted and brought to us over a period of 10 years workshops by the Melchizedek Cloister Emerald Order teacher, Speaker 1, Ashiana Dean, and of course, Speaker 2 and 3. Together they formed the triad team that brought to us the modern day CDT, Cloister Dora Terra Plate translations. So what I'd like to achieve from putting this information together and presenting this knowledge today is a simplification and a breakdown of sometimes very deep and complex concepts to do with creation, with the steps, the order, the structure, because everything has a structure and it's not a haphazard creation. It follows a certain structure. And when something doesn't follow a certain structure and is not aligned to the original source and the original structure, it becomes distorted according to cosmic and metaphysical and cardinal laws of the universe and creation. Note also, if you're a newcomer to this channel, it would be advisable to begin with the older videos first in order to make sense of what's presented in this segment. Okay, so I will begin creation and discussing creation. Creation began with electrotonal consciousness. Okay, so they're units of energy substance. The smallest unit of energy substance is called a Partiki, a PartikA, and a Particum. I've talked about this before. Partiki makes the void. PartikA makes the masculine antimatter electrical particles, and Particum is the feminine magnetic particles. This is not about gender. Okay, we're not talking about God here to have a certain gender. These are principles of first creation. They're types of energies that form the basis structure of the smallest units of consciousness of this creation. Okay, there's electric type particles. It's masculine. It carries a positive charge. And then there's the magnetic type particles that carry negative charge. And the third unit of consciousness is actually attained when there's a depolarization. So when we merge the feminine and masculine, and there's an equal and balanced reaction, not an opposite reaction, an equal balanced reaction, then they come into harmony, and this is called the Manu force, which is the positive and the negative become balanced and they reach zero charge. And this is known as depolarization. And the field that depolarization occurs into is called the void. Okay, the Manu, the void. Okay, so how does creation occur? Creation actually happens in cycles. Okay, there are 5 primary cycles, and there's sub-cycles or sub-stages within each cycle. Everything from the tiniest little atom unit of consciousness to the largest unit of consciousness has an energetic signature. And it's composed of a spectrum of frequencies arranged in forms that hold different yet unique blueprints. Okay, and these form morphogenetic fields. So think of it as fields of energy pertaining to each thing that's individuated. Most people cannot, with the naked eye, view the morphogenetic field because it's light and energy of the human soul. They can't view it entering the first breath of the newborn baby, and they can't visibly see the light and energy of the soul as it leaves the body during transition. Yet, this event of consciousness morphogenesis, or energy transitioning, transmigrating, or transfiguring into another form, occurs in natural cycles of life all the time. Right now, as I'm speaking, I'm transmuting certain cells in my DNA, but we don't see that happening, okay, because it's happening in the DNA. So it's a field beyond the field of physicality, which we're unable to view unless we go one step higher into a higher density. Time is not in a linear fashion. Time's connected to frequency, connected to your DNA, and it's not linear. It's a well-known fact that actually no teaching system, apart from the freedom teachings, even begins to touch upon first creation or even morphogenetic field. There's no system out there that will teach this. The maximum they will teach is the 7 chakras connected to the body, and of course leaving out the 8 morphogenetic chakras from the thymus, which is the 8th, to the universal chakras, which are chakras 14 and 15. Now, you may ask, are we all connected to organic eternal life cycles? The answer is no. We're not all connected to organic eternal life. We did, however, come from the same place. We're all born out of that first seed of creation, but what happened after that is linked to what the individuated consciousness chose for itself, because we acquire all these layers of dimensional layers. And one of these dimensional layers is, of course, they have the atomical D1, have the emotional D2, and mental D3. The decisions we make at D2 and D3 pertaining to our emotions and mind, that determines where the rest of the anatomy, how it's shaped from there on. Sometimes our choices, well, not sometimes, always, our choices made, whether it's on a personal or collective level, can lead to the digression or fragmentation of the original template, or can lead to the evolution of that DNA template. Okay, now when a certain level of distortion is reached, one can quite easily become cut off from source. So he or she becomes like a lost ship that's lost direction and memory of where it's going. Okay, if there are a lot of distortions within the Kathara grid or DNA template of an individual or species, the personal Merkaba field will not function in harmony with the natural energy circulation rhythms of planetary, galactic, universal, and time matrix Merkaba fields and the universal Kathara grid. Now, some people argue that this is a ruthless system. It's not built on mercy, but it is, because it's giving you the free will to decide where you want to be. Which wave do you want to ride? It's not a ruthless system because it doesn't deny your free will. It always gives you a chance to regenerate and return back home. Those lost are always offered an opportunity to be hosted in the natural cycles, because this system is built on love frequency. It's not a punishing badass karma system like people think it is. This system is badass karma, it's terrible. It's a simply energetic consequence one expresses only when they hold within what they hold within their own central bank in terms of quanta. The more you have, the more you can give. Say someone holds very little quanta and isn't aware of the connection to perpetual life source, then they're completely lost, are they not? Because their thoughts, emotions, expressions, habits, choices all emerge from a place of lack instead of a place of fulfillment, of joy and equanimity. So freedom teachings are essentially teaching us what the ancient tribes have been trying to teach us for a very, very long time. You can say millions and millions of years. That energy, true energy, really never dies. True energy is not the energy connected to the false light system that's finite and artificial, like the systems they use in the cloning centers. That's a finite type of energy. But someone who's connected to perpetual life will never live in lack. They will live in a perpetual rejoice and an indefinite Ashalaya quanta regeneration and regenesis. So right now, we're at this junction right now where we have to make a very important decision as to where we want to go and which spiral do we want to ride, the Metatronic or the Christic spiral. Now, one thing the New Age have correct is we're at the crossroad, and it's a very important time right now. That's as much as they know. They don't know why, they don't know. They think the whole collective is ascending. It doesn't quite work that way. It's an individual choice. because we are our own portals, but of course there is something collective happening as well. So where do we go from here? The turnaround point right now is something that I will be explaining in detail in this video, because in terms of the big picture, like the whole cycle, where are we? Where do we fit into that picture? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And of course, I want to explain the sequence of creation from the very beginning. So like I said, it's not going to be an easy thing to break these concepts down. If you feel listening to this becomes too overwhelming, don't force the mind to understand every little bit of detail, because I certainly don't. It took me a long time to actually make sense of what this information is about. Over time, though, with frequency accretion, the little details will start to actually make sense. It starts to come together nicely. So try and understand the gist of the whole meaning of today's presentation rather than the particulars, the small details. Now, creation cycles, there's 5 primary cycles, and I will summarize before I begin to talk about each cycle. I want to summarize the 5 cycles just really quickly, okay? So in a nutshell, the 5 cycles are: 1, light-born cycle, which is to do with the Terran, to do with the Partiki 1, Partiki 2, and this has to do with the void and what comes out of the void. That's stage 1. Stage 2, or cycle 2, if you like to call it that, is star-born cycle. It has to do with the Partiki seed atom, the Rosetta, the Terran 1 to 9 layers, the tachyon cycles. Stage 3 is called life-born cycles. This is an interesting one. It has to do with the 5 elements that we know of. So the 5 elementals, the Partiki body, the 4 density levels, the 4 sheaths, the Rashalay body or the Rasha bodies, or the dark matter body, the crystallar core, the 15 gel spheres that become bands and orbs and spheres around us that form the morphogenetic field, the crystal sets power generators, okay, the elemental commands, the 5 elements, the Eron and the Eros, okay. So when you hear of Eros flame, this is where it belongs. This is the 3rd stage. 4th is called the God-born cycle. Okay, this is the Big Bang, the dark matter here working towards the Eukaryothista body, the birth of the outer body of the Eukaryothista. This stage has to do with the birth of the crystal Risha Amore, the 7 suns inner, the 7 suns outer, and the Son of God, which is the 15th layer, and the working towards the Eukaryothista body. The last is the 5th cycle, okay, the 5th cycle, which is called the Christ or the Christ, but it's really Christ. It's a Kryst, born cycle. It's the Son of God, body of the Christ is born, and the Adashi cycle, Adashi return cycle begins. This is linked to Kali Yuga, the end of the cycle and the turnaround point, and the return back to source. You know, each consciousness cycle is tied to time. Time is tied to evolution. And of course, it's all happening at once. We're just living in different time cycles, depending on where our consciousness is stationed. But we perceive time in a linear fashion down here, of course. But one complete Iana cycle is equal to 24 cycles that are complete. And that's culminates the whole process of birth and return back to source, and this is called 1 Iana cycle. This is where the name Ianis come from. So now I'm going to elaborate on the cycles from birth to manifestation in the physical, which is called fetal integration, in a linear fashion. Okay, so in a chronological order, just for simplicity. But just know that these are all happening at once. Okay, now I will elaborate on the cycles, beginning with the 1st cycle. So as I said, first is the light-born cycle. It's the starseed or the prana cycle, or the light-born cycle, starseed. This is to do simply with the creation of the prana cycle and the appearance of the first light seed. So first light seed, a process by which the first seed emerges out of God's source. You can say this is the first of the creation process. Okay, so the light seed emerges out of God's source. Stage 1. Stage 2 is called starborn. Starborn starts with the first PartikA unit within the void, then the second unit, then the third unit. So the first is the triad. Triad means 3. It's the 3 units together. They really form the beginning of everything. The PartikA units are the photo generator cells. 3 units coming together then birth what's called the Torrent light seed, also known as the Eckasha or Eckasha God seed. So the Torrent becomes the house of the generating quantum, where we hold our reserve quanta. The PartikA units continue to group and accrete upon the Partiki Grids. So they form Keylons and then Keylon codes. They group together and they form complex Keylons. Then they form what is a crystalline template. It's made of light spectra that flashes on and off. It also runs sound frequency and electromagnetism. This becomes a morphogenetic field crystal body. The blueprint, this is the blueprint, our blueprint upon which matter and identity later on manifest. So in other words, the morphogenetic field is the Partiki Grids, which is made of Keylons grouped together. And these Keylons grouped together is called Keylon thought crystals. This is where the concept that we are crystals, we are made of crystals, comes from. So the Torrent holds within it primal force proto-gelesiac layers called ether gels. Okay, there are 1 to 9 inner layers and there are 10 to 15 outer layers. These have names. Okay, so in the order of 1 to 9, we have 1 Nada, 2 Adama, 3 Jaffa, Tau, Idon, Jada, Tama, Ka, Ra, Sha, La, Ka, Tha, and Ra, and they're the 15 layers inside the Partiki or Partiki. Then it starts to extend out into the Torrent. So the Torrent holds the Partiki, which is the key generating factory. Okay, this is where our 144 harmonic keys or genetic keys, also called fire letter codes. This is where they're made, they're manufactured. So the fire letter codes, when they activate, so you hear that term, activate your fire letter codes. You hear that a lot, but people don't understand where it comes from. It comes from here, within the Torrent field. You have the fire letter codes, and when they activate, they result in DNA strand braiding. The braiding can be messed up too. It can happen, but it can happen in reverse. If fire letter codes are mathematically reversed, like when you connect it to the Metatronic spiral, they're mathematically reversed, they're geometrically distorted, they're misaligned, and they're chaotically organized. And this is when you attract the elemental and figment attachment. This is when they begin to appear in the person's personal shield in the morphogenetic field. So harmonic keys have an overtone and have a base tone. Base tones are the ere substance, the magnetic or the negative, the feminine charge. Overtone is the mane or the masculine. It has a positive charge in this universe that we're in. In other universes, it's different, but in our universe, the top is masculine, the bottom is feminine. It's positive over negative. Okay. Now, these follow mathematical formula forming crystal spiral. You've probably heard of crystal spiral, catch the crystal spiral wave. This becomes the basis for the formation of what you know as Kathara Grid template. So the Kathara Grid circles, as you know, the units are 12. Each holds a mathematical program for one dimension. So we go from 1 to 12 dimensions of consciousness. Each of those circles holds the program for one dimension. one particular dimension. And there's, of course, sub-dimensions. Anyway, also during this star-born stage 2, the jewel or the jala key forms. Prana forms here also, and the first cycles of this process. The importance of prana here is that it becomes the key to backflow, return to and from source. Prana is super important here. It has everything to do with how much a person is capable of holding in terms of quanta. Also, planetary objects hold quanta, like the sun. When quanta expires, this is when we die. This is called biological death or badoa. So we have become so accustomed to our prana to expire, undergo death, that death has become the norm here. But the process of death is actually an unnatural cycle. I'll talk more about this in a bit. During this process here, prana is generated within this unit. It's akin to a central bank, okay, where all the money comes from, like a central bank, except this one doesn't rip you off, okay, and it's where the Jelliziak balls of radiation form here with different charge and quantum holding taking place, okay. Next step is prana, ire, and mane. We're still in this second cycle. So here we have the positive charge, the negative charge, and the void coming together, and they spark. And through continued sparking and pulsing, they generate what is called a tachyon cycle. Okay, they generate a tachyon cycle, and tachyons form like flashpoints, and these sparks are what makes life. This becomes the first creation point. When they reach a certain vibrational level, everything goes back inside the Partiki and replicates and flows back into source. This is eternal creation. It's perpetual. It's not meant to stop. It's not meant to die. It's not meant to change. It's meant to be a perpetual, eternal life cycle. It's meant to be an indefinite thing, to recreate itself. So quanta that's sent back to source is replicated and then comes back out. And this is how light cells, or I should say clusters of light cells, because they come out in clusters, this is where they're formed. In essence, spark and flashpoint generation through the first keys is what makes life. This is so beautiful. This is self-generating quantum. They don't vampire on other life form. They go back to source, they come back regenerated. Okay, we don't need any other technologies. We don't need infrared light. We don't need, med beds. We don't need any of that because we have it all built in. These are qualities of, it holds a quality innate within it. It's self-replicating. It's made to replicate. As long as that connection to source, to source creator is there. Furthermore, here is where the prana keys, positive charge, become alons, which carry the prana, because each of those prana, units, they need a holding unit, something that will carry them. So the base tone keys are the shalons. The shalons carry the negative, and they become the ire, which are the feminine, and last the keylons are carriers of the overtones or the mane, and that's the positive charge. This is just one tachyon cycle, which consists of 12 cycles, and then you complete one tachyon cycle. Then you go through to the next step, which becomes a full star-born cycle, which I'll talk about next. And don't forget what happens within also is reflected outside. So here is as within, so without. How these units express themselves becomes the template, if you like, or the prototype, or mirrored exactly the same on the outside. Okay, or what we perceive as outside. Maybe there is no outside. Do you ever think that maybe when there is no outside, that everything is experienced within a morphogenetic field? Everything's a hologram, and maybe we're experiencing the world from the inner. We're not actually existing in a world that seems like we're interacting with others. Maybe it's all within our field internally. I don't know. But, this makes sense to me. As within, so without. Everything that happens on this level is also mirrored on the outside. So these rings that form around the Terran are gelesic layers. So they're radiation units. They hold crystalline within them. They hold crystals, okay? They're 15 layers and bands inside form within. And this is still the Partiki. So the inner yoke that we know as 1, 2, 3 dimensions, so first, second, third, or the Nada, Adama, and Jaffa. I don't know the names of the 4, 5, 6 bands and the others, but they go 1, 2, 3, that's one band, 4, 5, 6, another one. And then there's a barrier. 7, 8, 9 is another one and a barrier. Then 10, 11, 12 and a barrier. And then 13, 14, 15. So there are 5 density levels, all have barriers, okay? There's 3 gel layers between the dimensions, totaling of 15 dimensional layers. Each of these 15 layer templates represents an elemental field of consciousness. That's why we can't pierce the layers, go into another dimension just like that. We have to accrete enough frequency to pierce that layer, okay? So the radiation templates are the elements of the periodic table that we know. This is where the elemental fields form. The 5 basic elemental fields are divided into 15 gelesic layers, 15 crystalline bands, and this is where it all comes from on this level. They're also divided into like core solids. We have ethers, we have the liquids, and we have the gases. And the 5 elements in different combinations create different manifestations here on Earth. You can get a different, like, no two people share the exact same encryption. That's because what happens on the inside is always different from person to person. Even on an emotional level, even physical, even biological twins, identical twins, they don't share the same encryption. So, for example, give you an example, on the D2 emotional body, the virtue and emotion of love is actually connected to the chakra 2, as you know, the sacral, D2 level body, and it corresponds to the color orange and the element of water and ether in combination. Chakra 1 is actually the earth crystal, and it's earth crystal and ether. Everything, all these energy centers have ether in the formula. Solar plexus, the 3rd chakra, is air and ether. Heart chakra or chakra is fire and ether. Throat is earth crystal and ether, and 3rd eye is water and ether, and crown is air and ether. So they all have ether, okay, in it. And the 12th chakra culminates all of the above. It is the crux of everything. It's earth crystal, it's water, it's air, it's fire, and ether. And 12th chakra is the chakra connected to your Maharic seal, 12 inches beneath your feet. This is the divine chakra that connects you to your Christos avatar self. It's like we have to be in command of the elements to activate the master seal. So this can be done by running the Maharic seal. It's on our channel. Maharic seal, Maharic shield, frequency, and it's a pale silver frequency. Like I said, techniques on our channel. If you wanna, you have to run this for a while to be able to, recode your, your chakra system and every other system beneath it. So when you run the D12 Maharic seal, you're recoding from 1 to 11 to 12, basically. Okay, this is how we run elemental commands. The first structure of the Partiki body, you find first density levels connected to the ether at the core, and the density is water or liquid core. 3rd is solid, corresponding to the mantle of the earth, and 4 is air, which is connected to the wind command. Then, of course, the fifth is the vapors or the fire command or the flame. So when we do elemental command, they come from the Partiki of the Rashalay bodies, supposed to be the 144 elements. We have the smaller commands and we have the larger commands. The smaller commands are the ether, the earth, the water, the air, and fire. And the larger ones are called the master command. So mastering these commands, it's when we start to tap into like moving clouds, like cloud command, plasma, or moving earth, crystalla command, and water becomes the Aquaelle flows command. Air is the wind song. Okay, so take a look at the Rashalay wind song encryption code called the core flame. It's stunning. It's a beautiful, beautiful sacred code. When we do the elemental commands, we'll be calling on all the levels of your own being. It's not anything outside of you. It's within you, in your codes. The fire commands are the flame commands linked to the flame body activations that we always encourage you to activate. So to anchor, you must do them in a specific way to activate the DNA braiding process, or otherwise it doesn't work the way it's meant to work. Elemental command, we can actually work co-creatively with them. So you can, create your own reality by mastering these commands, these elementals. Someone who has full elemental command can move clouds, can stop flows of blood and move objects. We work collaboratively with these elements. Okay. Now I'll be talking about the tachyon cycle. Remember the 12 shifts, 12 flashpoints? This is called the tachyon cycle. When the 12 are complete, that's one round, that's one tachyon cycle. Now, how is that connected to our divine blueprint? Where does our divine blueprint template, if you like, come from? So after one tachyon, the Rosetta and seed atom form. The first PartikA comes from the triad, as I said, the 3 units. Then we have the first PartikA, and then the Taran, and then the Partiki. Flashpoints shift the atoms 45 degrees. Each flashpoint shifts the atoms 45 degrees, rotational shifts. And when 12 shifts are accomplished, then that's 12 flashpoints multiplied by the 45 rotational shifts. This forms one tachyon cycle. It flows into source, replicates, comes out, then begins another tachyon cycle called the dyad. So same thing, the dyad completes a full tachyon cycle, replicates, comes out, forming a myad. These become radiation clusters or cells from the Taran field. Myad then forms the monad, and then the amora or amoria, and then it reaches the 6 access points. So why is 6 important? Because it is where our divine blueprint is, where it takes place. It's really what determines our genetic underlay. Okay, it doesn't stay at 6, it multiplies further and it forms clusters. Then these clusters within clusters become the Rosetta, or the 9 layers of the Rosetta. When it goes to the 7th cycle of the Rushete, then it goes to the next expansion cycle and it comes out as a seed atom holding the Rosetta inside it. Rosetta has an outer cluster of energy of spheres within spheres within spheres within the seed atom, and that seed atom is called the Unified seed atom. I'm pretty sure you all know what the Unified is. It's beautiful code that I'm going to share all these codes on Telegram. So if you have a look there, you search for Unified, YUNASIA, you will find the code. It's just beautiful. Okay, beautiful encryption. So the Unified code is within the Rashalay flame. Okay, phew. Up to the 3rd cycle or 3rd stage. 3rd stage is called the life-born cycle. So if you're still here with me, that's great. Because like I said, it's not easy concept to digest. But your higher parts, even if you just take 10, 20, 30, 50%, that's still good, because your higher anatomy, your tachyons, your PartikA, your all these small consciousness units, they are resonating with the frequency of what's being said. Everything has a tonal encryption. Remember, everything's sound and light. So on a mental level, it takes a while to catch up, but on a higher level, your higher part is full aware of what's being said. So just keep going. But anyway, yeah, it gets really interesting from here, because we're starting to get closer to that physical manifestation. All this is happening, that's pre-matter. Now, when we get to matter, that becomes fetal integration. Okay, so the torrent expands and contracts and makes sparks and returns to source and comes back out, and then it makes life-born cycle. This is the third stage. It is called life-born cycle. Life-born cycle happens in 6 cracks, 6 pops, and a little bang. Okay, this is still before the Big Bang that science talks about. These are embedded expansions. They're not spiraling ones. They're embedded within. So all these cracks, pops, and the little bang, they're happening inside. It gives 6 layers within and becomes the first inner layers of the Partiki template. Then the 6 pops or pillars of power, they pop from outside in. So in other words, the first is outer, then the inners form. Then the center point. At the center point is the crystalla, where the crystal encryption is, right at the center. So the crystalla. So now we have the 12, which is the 6 pops and 6 cracks. The 3 remaining are the expansion layers, the 13, 14, and 15, otherwise known as the primal light fields. Okay, now at the end we have the Partiki template, the 15 gel layers and the 5 crystal bands. These become the Partiki body. Now that's life-born cycle part 1. There's other parts to this stuff, life-born cycle. The names and the tonal resonances, the songs that we sing, like the Son of Lyra, Son of Aurora, Kemalahati, all have to do with these units here, with the verbal translations of the steps here. Okay, now stage 2 of this life-born cycle, there's a formation of 15 gelesic layers, which become the rings. The rings are the layers in the template. There's layers, there's rings, there's crystalline bands. They become spans and crystal orbs in the Partiki body. Notice the word spans. That's what we're learning to do now, is go through the spanner gates. The evacuation mission is about accessing through our codes, inner codes, the spanner gates for evolution out of this matrix system. I'll discuss why that is in a bit. At the center, there's a crystalla, a little radiation form called the Itaur. Okay, there's rings and then spans within it. More gelesic layers and fields are formed. Stage 2 of the life-born cycle, we have the Alons, Chalons, and Kaylons. They form the 12 primary crystal structures of the fire chambers. You would have heard the fire chambers. This is important, remember this word, fire chambers. This is the largest structure of the Partiki body in terms of personal anatomy. It's around us and not just inside. Its little crystalline shields form the 12 primary fire lines. And you have the Alons, Chalons, and Kaylons, which have a acronym, by the way, ASK, A-S-K, Alons, Chalons, and Kaylons. The fire chambers start to open up, and when they open up, that is how prana exchange happens. I will talk more on these chambers because they're connected to what's happening to the sun right now. It's important because when they fire up, they're actually the cause point for manifest creation in the physical. So remember this word, 2 words, fire chambers. Now, I want to talk about the, excuse me, I want to talk about the prana exchange process because it's linked to what's happening to the sun. In one of my videos, I've talked about the sun going into Bardoa, which is biological death. So I'm going to take you a little bit into, explaining what is going on with the sun. It's important right now because we hear about prana exchange in connection with the solar sun and the sun's prana exchange with the Aquaelle sun, which is adjacent matrix that we're being hosted through. This exchange is what we know as solar symbiosis, when the sun gives us prana. This has always been the state of the breatharians, the Taranisians. We live off solar symbiosis. But this doesn't happen anymore because currently the sun is going through the prana receiving process. So it's accepting codes and it's accepting prana exchange from the Aquaelle sun. Why? Because it's going through prana compaction. It's losing its gelesic layers. You know those 15 layers? It's losing those layers. And that's what's producing CMEs. Okay, so when we were breatharians in Tara, known as Taranisians, we breathed through the skin pores, but not anymore because we don't breathe prana seed anymore due to the phase locking of our Merkaba. Same thing with the sun. The sun's prana seed has compacted. It means it's self-imploded. And it's undergoing biological death. This is like a separation from the seed atom, and that flow back to source can no longer happen for the sun, not just the sun, but all biological humans and life on this planet is going through the same thing. This, in essence, is what's happening to our sun. And the sun right now is being sustained by the Aquaelle sun. So it's on like a ventilator, okay? It's what's happening to the sun right now is due to induced process leading to prana compaction, just like, suffocation. Thousands of years have caused this, thousands of years of reversals running through the sun's morphogenetic field has prevented the sun from renewing its prana, and it's led to its Bardoa or biological death. So the sun, as you know, is the fuel of the solar system. It's been heavily abused by the fallen angelic legions and races for its quantum, because they've taken its quantum for thousands of years. Okay, so it's been abused, heavily abused. And the Anunnaki, Anu Elohim, thanks to them, the Merkaba mechanics of the sun's change. It's losing its gelesic layers because they connected a wormhole to the sun from Nibiru, connecting it to the 55 Fibonacci Death Star spiral architecture. So they're using a different, if you like, mathematical formula to extract its life force out of it, which has left it to die, basically. So it's phase locked, which means it cannot renew its own quanta, and it's restricted from breathing rhythm of the solar body. It's an inability to breathe at the moment is because it's unable to contract inwards towards source and hence recharge and interface with the antimatter or the Rasha body template. This necessitates, of course, an evacuation. So we're not in the golden age. We're in the golden age maybe in terms of people waking up and learning about consciousness and who they are, but we're not in the golden age, as in we're not getting an upgrade. We're actually losing some, like the sun in 200 something years is not going to exist anymore because it's going through Bardoa. So this necessitates an evacuation because you can't have a life system without sun. Okay. Also, the Earth grids are half of its thirds are reversed and sucked into the caduceus network. So we're not But we don't see it as a negative because spirit can exist in any form on any dimension. What we have to try and do is evolve enough, accrete frequency, and leave this field, dimensional field we're in, because really what's happening is it's phase locked. It's not going anywhere. Now, in terms of evacuation, if we can activate internally, we awaken what is called our own Aquaelle sun, our own inner sun. As far as the indigos and awakened humans are concerned, the indigo shield's actually hosting Earth. So first, we must attain a certain level of activation. We must bring our Mahayana imprint and codes back online because they've been dormant for so long. They've been phase locked. There are 12 incarnate levels on each level. There are 12 levels. This totals to 144. This means we need to get to a point, a level of activation and awareness where we're aware of our 12 identities manifesting simultaneously. Okay, we're being hosted by the Aquarie beings into their matrix by prana exchange, which means we are integrating light codes that work like, mathematical codes to override what is called as Shona or Shona dead light. Okay, and activate our antimatter Rasha bodies the correct way. All things are connected, but some layers we cannot see with the naked eye because of the frequency gap. So what we're doing now is helping the sun to prevent prana compaction too soon. That's going to happen. It's inevitable, but we're preventing that process of happening like now in 20 years. So the Aquaelle sun for now is sustaining our sun maybe for a couple of 100 years, but eventually it's going to pull its assistance. So it doesn't fall in the fallen matrix, and the sun is going nova. Okay, that's the next stage for the sun. So another thing that happens in addition to prana generation at this life-born cycle is, so I'm going back to life-born cycle now, just had to put that in here in regards to the sun. So another thing that happens at this third stage of life-born cycle is the beginning of the formation of the 5 primary elemental planes. Many contemporary and ancient teachings actually talk about the 5 elemental planes. Most of them are established in Eastern philosophies like Chinese, Wu Xing systems, which describes the 5 phases of natural phenomena. Okay, in the tantric system or the Vedic system, there's 5 elements that correspond to 7 chakras. The first 4 correspond to earth, water, fire, and air, while the other higher 3 correspond to the higher chakras corresponding with spirit. So classical texts use the concept of spirit element as well as shamanic teachings. All are being infiltrated and changed in terms of original meaning, by the way. Some still hold truth. The truth that still holds is the concept of the 5 elements, not where they come from, but the concept. The freedom teaching explains the 5 elemental planes that form those 15 rings and spans, which correspond to the 5 density levels that become the living matrix system we reside in, we live in. We come now to the fourth stage. Fourth stage of the cycle, the creation cycle, is called the God-born cycle. God-born cycle. This is to do with Rasha bodies. Why are Rasha bodies important? Because they're linked to ascension. Another name for ascension is time travel or space-time travel, wave riding, stargate travel, and teleportation. Okay, remember what I said about the Adashi return journey? There's something called Adashi temples. So they're consciousness stations where we stop before we make the full Adashi return. Their consciousness stops. Okay, so the Adashi Temple 7, Ash says, is the only one activated. The rest are inactive due to the corruption of the grids. This stage, again, requires a certain level of activation. We need to learn to glide, slide, and span, eventually span. when we walk through a stargate and come out unscathed, you know, when we just walk through and come out intact on the other side. But that can't happen right now because we don't have the enough, frequency to be able to do that. The freedom teaching meditations offer that access key to be able to locate the coordinate points. And when you access these codes within the body, you also activate the Rasha bodies. And wherever you are on the planet, doesn't matter where you are, it's not about being positioned in like Florida or, in certain points. It does help because there's safe zones, but we can access those from wherever we are on the planet, because through your template and through the inner coordinates, you'll be able to align to spanner 7 up to Adashi 7. And it's like having an automatic map, like a beam. Wherever you are, it will find you if you are on that frequency. Okay, this is what we're learning to do now through the flame body activations and learning about this material. This is true ascension mechanics. It's not the new age ascension where, do nothing, just, ignore your mental body, ignore your emotions, be happy, be joy, false positivity, and we're all ascending. That's not true ascension. This is a false ascension timeline. What we're learning here to do in freedom teachings is instead the true ascension mechanics. Because if we don't, the end result is going to be prana compaction, like the sun, which is bada, which is biological death. And then you may get caught in another cycle of death, old age, rebirth, and it goes on. And then you're phase locked and down the fallen systems and all that, which if you want to go that way, that's fine. Christics don't want to go that way. Christics want to evolve their consciousness, activate the DNA, learn how to glide, slide, and span, and activate the 144 fire-letter codes, because we want to go home. We want to go to source. We don't want to be in a system, in a vampiric system, where everything's false. Everything's based on falsity, control, and not a good system. We've been there, done that. We've tried it. Okay. Now, we are being taught now to starfire, to learn about starfire ascension, aka evacuation. Watch my video, by the way, titled Starfire Ascension, to learn about ascension along with Earth's ascension. In essence, what's happening is parts of the grids will shift up 90% into the transcendental passage and merge our atoms here to God's self, pulling out of the Shona bonding, which is, Shona is the artificial light that feeds off others, okay? It's turning those Shona bonds, bringing them to, or transforming them to Shalaya light, releasing the Jari, going into the Shadi band, into the transcendental passage. Okay, don't worry about the terms too much, but this is another word for saying evolution. Okay, little pieces of land and people who hold higher frequencies will actually ascend to median Earth, where they take materialized form in the next density level up. Now, the New Earth, New Age community talk about this is reached a certain way, we're all evolving, but it's not the correct way, because the correct way is through inner activation, not by doing nothing. Doing nothing does not get us anywhere. We've done nothing, and we, as a result, become phase locked. The new Earth is found on higher dimensional plane within our field here, not a place we need to take a spaceship, Elon's rockets or spaceships to in order to ascend. That's not the point. This is not how it's done. You don't need to go anywhere. You need to activate from within, because I'm explaining now the levels of creation. As you can see, it's plain and simple. Everything starts from the first light seed atom. We have the flame body activations and many other inner technologies that recode our templates starting from the first light seed atom. So it's all here. We have it. Okay, this is a process we're engaging in right now. It's called starfire ascension. This is the beginning. The Earth has safe zones, as we have lighthouses, the sentinels, the light, the watchtowers. And the watchtower inside our body, when it activates, also activates our inner Aquaelle sun, activating the aqua blue hydrolase spacesuit. So start with the meridian lines, then the axiatonal, and forms a mesh of hydrolase between atoms. So hydrolase is essentially water, but it's the true water, not the water that you get from the ocean here. It's a different kind of water. It's activate. I'll talk a little bit in a minute. So this hydrolase water, what's significant about it is it holds the celestaline. And when we move from transfigure from one dimension to the next, one density level to the next, it releases a celestaline. And this is what shifts the atoms of the body. So you can go through stargates. The inner sun is the Aquaelle sun. It will activate the aqua ball of fire that fuels the Unified underlays that moves through and opens the cells to receiving the hydrolase wave and gets you to the point where you have enough shallow layer light instead of Shauna dead light. Now, when you have 75% of shallow layer light, basically anything from 70 and up, that's good. That means you atomically shift into the slide zone. So we slide into, these frequency bands, and we begin interacting with median Earth. This is what ascension Earth is. This is in essence, the process of ascension. It's riding the wave to the next frequency band. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the Rasha bodies, because this is the fourth stage of creation. Okay, by the way, these bodies, the Rasha bodies, are mirrored in everything around us. You see these layers in the atmosphere. You see planetary bodies like the crust, the mantle, the lower upper mantle. You see the crystalline layers, and the layers, that's what they are. They're different rings of Rasha bodies. They're rings, okay? There's rings around each other. And then everything has a jewel in the core. So this is a stage where spans and crystal orbs form. So when you see a crystal orb on an orb, there's something, it's to do with the Rasha body. It's an activation of some form of crystal orb in the Rasha lay body. Now the alons, which are part of the matter ore, become the meta ore. You notice how it becomes R to E. Metal with an ore at the end, it could do with how metal is made, and when the concept, and tied into the concept of the philosopher's stone, maybe, the mysterious alchemical substance is the philosopher's stone that turns metal into gold. They don't know at the core of the Rasha body is a magical, eternal God substance. They don't know that. They just call it a mysterious substance that transforms metal into gold. They use a substance that later on they found is linked to ascension called celestaline, or the white powder gold, that renders the being immortal. Of course, immortal isn't the same as eternal life. In fact, it's the opposite of eternal life. The negative factions have found the elixir, to eternal life. They think it's eternal life, but it's not, because they'll only have ability to mummify and immortalize a body. They've, for example, created consciousness chips, chips. They can simply transfer by placing it in one body and then placing it in another body, and they transfer consciousness. And they call this an immortality, but that's not the same as eternal life. That's just one round of cycle that they get to feel a little bit untouchable. The other cycles, the full Adasha return cycles, they're not within their grasp, because that's eternal life. They don't have the access to that, because what they did is they compacted their own prana seed. They died a long time ago. because they've made certain choices. Essentially, certain things have to occur, like fertilization at the core, due to the prana exchange process. This becomes the alchemization, the alchemy, the work of alchemy. So it's a replicated module. When this is done a certain way, this can change or can be changed in terms of its nature, from gas, liquid state, into solid, into vapor, through utilization of these energy units when we know how to utilize these units. There's things we don't see the same way. This happens within our bodies that are composed of these same units and atoms. This can be viewed with the naked eye too sometimes. If you are tuned into frequency, we can see rings around people, planetary bodies, and this is where aura comes into it. And the whole orbing thing as well. It's noticeable sometimes, but usually it's not, because we're not plugged into these levels of frequency. We're only tuned into D3 and D2, emotional and mental bodies. So the Aelons, Keylons, and Shalon shields, which are the carriers of neutrons, protons, and electrons, if you were to look at them from a D3 perspective, they're carriers of charge, masculine, feminine, negative charge, and neutral, the void, together forming the triad of everything that becomes solid. Everything is three in threes. They're layers that make up the orb spans, and they have an acronym: ASK, Aelon, Shalons, Keylons. They're crystalline spheres. That's why when we go through stargates, we release the magical substance that they call the Philosopher's Stone. What it is, it's simply celestaline. Check out my YouTube video titled Starfire Ascension and Restoration of the Messianic Template. I explain the process of the technical process behind it. It's called transfiguration. So one of these Rasha bodies in the Rasha Amore body is a third dimensional template. It's made of 60 shields, 60 fields, and it's formed by a combination of masculine and feminine, the Attore male aspect and the Adore female aspect of the Rasha body. So the Amore body has masculine and feminine aspects. Amore, love. So it's got both feminine and masculine. One spins clockwise and the other counterclockwise. That means they rotate on opposite particle spins, creating our universe and a parallel universe. Parallel universe means it's running on base electrical. Our system here is feminine. It runs on base magnetic, feminine. Our parallel universe runs on base electrical, masculine. So now the 60 shields and the 60 fields form the Kathara Grid. So now we're up to Kathara level. Kathara Grids, there's 15 rings each. Each corresponds to a dimension level, makes up 60 Rasha Amore body. It's so fascinating how it formed. Pulse 1 creates outer layer, body 4. Pulse 2 creates the D3, atmospheric mental body. Pulse 3 creates the D2, emotional telluric layer that we perceive as physical. Pulse 4 creates the D1 etheric atomic template, the physical. And D1 to D3 is a hover body pertaining to density 1. So now when it comes to the planetary body, say Earth, for example, each of these layers, D1, D2, and D3, correspond to the layers of the Earth's body. So that's why I know the Earth is not flat, because those that perceive the Earth is flat perceive it from a D1 perspective. They don't know that everything's rings and spirals. So it's not stationed like that, it's flat surface. Simply understand this and you'll know why. This theory is just a theory. It's null and void. Everything's cyclical and round, and its core is made up of rings, so how can anything be flat? It's just the way it's perceived is flat. Anyway, the Earth's body layer 1 is the frozen core. It corresponds to the Hoover or the Hoover body, the density 1 layer. Then the liquid core is density 2, which corresponds to the Earth's oceans and water body. Then you have the silica crystal in these layers, and that's where the temples and the subterranean and cloud cities come from. These layers all exist within the planetary body. When we understand the personal templates, we can see how that fits in with the larger picture and the larger bodies, planets, galaxies, etc. These rasher bodies become the templates upon which the Hoover and the radial bodies are formed. At the very center, there is the crystalla and the prana seed that has an Eron point at the core that unites all of these bodies and all the layers, and the opening connects to the Partiki level of creation. Now, within the rasher body is something also really nice, and it's called the Alurian chambers and the Navajo flows. The Alurian chambers within the rasher bodies, this is where pre-substance, pre-matter occur, and they start to move out from there into light body structure. So pre-matter, Navajo flows, and then Alurian chambers, and then begins the light process. The light body starts to form. So yes, it's literally spheres within spheres within spheres. Now we go into the fetal integration process. What's of importance to talk about here is a hydroacoustic body, or the Aja body, within which everything grows from time of fertilization. So first light body, then spirit body. So first light, then spirit body. This is all tethered into the fetal body. It starts from the egg and sperm coming together and in what's called Vibhati quantum. Then first cell is born into the womb. At the point of fetal integration, the new spirit comes, but not for a while. So initially, it's just living off the Vibhati quantum that comes with the Aja body. Now, the spirit body has a name. The spirit body is called the Ilomi Iradona spirit body. Also, I'll put the code up, or maybe I'll post it in Telegram. It's Ilom, E-L-U-M-E-I-R, Adona body, spirit body. So it's a structure. Within it, the Alurian chambers connect to the light body, are entwined and connected. Each of these Alurian chamber lines has a specific code related to the 12 of the elemental families, the first 12 elementals on the chart, on the elemental chart. So hydrogen all the way up to magnesium. Then they create children. So then they have those little, branches. And the 3 levels of the structure of one density level light body, you have the Aja body around the density levels and little ones that separate each of the density levels. So basically the elements that we know on the elemental chart is formed here, within these. Each line carries a specific element. So fascinating, isn't it? Once we know these things, we can start calling on the parent elements and work with them. They're conscious units, they're alive, and they respond to words, intentions, and thoughts. This is why when people say, oh, it's just a thought, how is that going to recode my DNA? Well, your DNA is literally made of thoughts. Thoughts are not just like, air and wind. They have a aliveness to them. They have an encryption, and this encryption recodes your DNA from the very core. All matter is alive. It's not just a bodysuit. They made us believe that, especially Christianity, they made us believe that the body is nothing. It's disgusting. It should be trashed. It should be, some Vedic traditions penalize and punish the body. They have these tapas, this intense spiritual practices where you have to like cause pain to your body, hold your arm up for like 40 years straight and cause pain so that you can detach from the body. But the body needs to be integrated. It's all biological and spiritual and alive, and it needs to all be integrated together. It's consciousness units. How can you disregard something conscious just because you see it as matter and revere something as extremely important, significant, just because you can't see it and it's considered spirit form or light? It all comes from the same source. It's all light, and it's all from God source, from the first God seed Adam. But death occurs when matter can't self-regenerate. When prana compacts, that's when your matter can't self-regenerate. That's when you can't do any self-healing by tweaking your thoughts and balancing emotions and things like that. That's when matter can't regenerate. That's when people run to doctors and ask for prescriptions and stuff like that, because what they're doing, they're masking the problem with a little bit of chemicals just to sort of gives the illusion that it's gone, the problem. But in the cells, in the DNA, the problem is still there. The distortion is there. So anyway, back to this. So there are 12 steps of materialization to materialize, so something to become physical. Everything comes from water element, but the water we have on this level is not the true water that that comes from undistorted, basically. The guardians say the water we have here is dead water. The true water is hydrolase. This becomes important for people seeking ascension because hydrolase, activating the right way, releases celesteline, which is the magical substance that's released during transfiguration. In other words, ascension. In other words, going through stargates, ascending dimensional levels. The hydrolase carries the I am presence. It occurs with it. It's in that bodysuit, and the Ija body also carries the I am presence. I am eternal. Now, when we're born here, we're born with distortions because the parents determine the encryption overlay for the gene codes. The underlay is already determined, comes with us, but the overlay is what comes with us in particular incarnation, so a flashpoint. Okay, so that then becomes the distortions on the mental, physical, emotional level that we know here as suffering and pain and, I can't get my head to be quiet and silent. These are all overlays. You can work with these levels of distortions by beginning with the body, emotional, mental, work your way out instead of like trying to become more ultra spiritual and deny the body what it needs. Okay, so let's recap. What comes first? The Aja body and spirit body come first. These are the most eternal. This is where you find the most eternal aspect of self. Then the light body grows just like the physical body grows, as consciousness steps in from here onwards. When it grows out, it forms prana and all the rest of it. So yeah, Ash explains the fetal integration so succinctly. I love the explanation. I'm not sure I can break it down too much, but I will attempt in my next video I'll attempt a fetal integration video, okay, and see if I can break it down. It's really, really, really interesting, okay? Now, what's also interesting is thoughts. This is our biggest problem, isn't it? Thoughts. Where do my thoughts come from? Why am I built like this? I just can't get my mind to switch off. The problem's not with switching the mind off. The problem is the quality of the thoughts. So that's part of the D3 makeup. It ties into being manipulated to do what we're being manipulated to do through the D3 plane. Essentially, when consciousness reaches inside of the womb, it becomes to expand out with the light body that gives you a spherical filter, a sac, that holds within it the parents' program in there, and that's where your thoughts go. So we're not blaming the parents, we're just saying there's a paradigm where it's hereditary, so DNA, not just through the DNA like physically, but also if your parent thinks a certain way, sometimes we inherit that way of thinking just by being around them, so energetic. So it holds within the parents the programming in your society, in your school, in your, that becomes a programming, as you know. But if there's a distortion in that body, that's where the mental distortions manifest in our lives. This is why galactic and planetary fields cause individuals to have distortions inherent within them from the time of fertilization. It comes from the outer fields. Just the fact that we're being born into a grid that's been overtaken by the APINs and, distortions in the grid system, that translates into our own DNA. So we get the J seals and we get the miasmas and we get the 4 black hearts and the seals and all these things that block us from realizing the true self. So now within the Aja bodies, specifically the Tiwa fields, is where matter begins to manifest. This becomes the fetus, and the entire Aja is a little source consciousness fields that holds a certain quantum of consciousness which steps down into the fetus, the fetal body, and grows the body out. Okay, growing using the first energies and progressively making the form into full embodiment, not the body we know we've got now, different kind of body. We're not really like, it's not how we're supposed to look as humans. Anyway, this then transfigures the elements, and then Mashaya again. That's the cycle. We're meant to go into cycles of birth, but not death. We're meant to go birth, full realization, then coming back through the Adashi cycle and back to God's source, not death and being caught in the astral. This is not a natural process. Reincarnation, mortal death, is unnatural, 100% unnatural. Death as we know it is not part of the natural cycles, the organic cycles. So the Rasha hub bodies expand out to create the Eckasha Aya level. That's the God world level. The same process happens on galactic and planetary levels. These are spirals of creation. They apply to all things and they manifest here and beyond. All starts at the level of dark matter body. Now, the Big Bang talked about in Western science is when these templates expand out to both physical matter manifestation. All of this you see in our physical world. This is what you see with the naked eye. So dark matter exists and holds template that arranges universes, galaxies, and what happens naturally within the core of the stars and the planets. So there can be eternal life. They breathe back from source and back into source, eternal life, consciousness. Finite systems, however, they go nova because the prana seed does not hold. It does not flow back to source and out of source. It compacts. It phase locks. So yeah, that's really something we have to understand. Now, if you are intrigued about how they connect to the Yuga cycles, and this stage we're in now is called the Kali Yuga cycle, which means physical manifestation. This is there is a video I've made on the Yuga cycles. I think it's 2 or 3 parts to it. You can check it out on the YouTube channel. Now, 24 sparks of you, 1 full round, that makes the Iyana cycle. So they're not cycles as in like you go through them as in linear time. They're cycles of consciousness, of DNA activation. Okay, last is before we reach the 5th stage, is the Eucharista grid. This is how God gates are created, from the first Partiki unit all the way to God gates as well. So you see those on the Stairway to Heaven maps. So it's easier if you can print one of those maps, you'll be able to follow what I'm saying. So it's called the Stairway to Heaven map. Now, the Rishik shield links our consciousness from the Veca, which is our time matrix, to the Eka inner worlds, to the Eckasha, which is the ultimate. The Eckasha does not fall, but the Eka and Veca worlds do fall. Okay, so this is where we can access the God worlds, is where we access the 0 point in our time matrix. So we bridge our D12 divine template with the next, which is the D13, via the blue flame mother arc to access the stairway to heaven. There's 7 spheres and 7 inside and 7 spheres on the outside, making a total of 14 layers. And then we have the last one, the 15th, which corresponds to the Ruche, Son of God. Does this remind you of a story in the Bible, the Son of God? Not literally a Son of God, but the 15th layer that we hold within that grid that takes us back to the Eckasha Aya God worlds. This is where we all come from originally. We're all sons and daughters of God, if we hold that connection to source. It's not meant to be a literal story like Son of God and the only Son of God. It's clearly that's a twisted version of the true story. Anyway, I'm just trying to hurry up a little bit, but you can pause, come back to it at any time. But yeah, I'm got to the final stage now, which is called the Christ or the Christ born cycle. The Ionic shield represents this cycle, the Christ or the Christ cycle. The Ionas are connected to the Eckasha Aya levels, which are connected to the Eka universes. Remember, we're in a Veca universe. We're trying to connect to an Eka universe, ultimately all the way up stairway to heaven to the Eckasha Aya level. So this is a form of birth, ascension, and return. A full cycle is an Iana cycle, which I will talk about more in a bit. Please note, this is not the birth that we're in now. We're in the stage of return, the turnaround point. So after creation, completion of 4 domains, Akashic cycles, the first 2 Partiki of the next domain are formed. So you finish the cycle, you're born into the, all these level stages, and then you go back to Dashi return. Then you give birth again to 2 Partiki units again. So it doesn't stop here. Again, it gives birth to 2 Partiki units, and then it becomes the next domain. Then they form a Taran light seed for the next domain. During the Akashic cycle, when you reach full expansion and come into your body, it becomes a Kali Yuga, because that's the full expansion. That's the farthest away from the Unisai. The contraction back to source is the Adashi cycle. So Akashi is out, Adashi is in. So catching the Christic spiral back home is the Adashi return. Something called Christa Rishaya, Son of God, body of the Christ is born, and the Adashi return cycle begins. I made a video on Mashayana imprint or template, can't remember, but yeah, it's on there if you want to learn about the transmigration, transfiguration, which is ascension. Now, in our limited consciousness here, we think that this point we've reached now is the descension of all consciousness, and it can't get any worse. It's kind of true, like, it can't get any worse because there's only up from here, but it can get worse. You could get further and further down into the darkness, into the abyss, into the fallen, and the wizard drac and the phantom matrices and the black hole system. But even then, there's still a way back home. You could rearrange yourself in when you become space dust, but there's no you anymore. Remember, there's no individuation. When your template's fragmented, it's not holding a good portion of consciousness. It's a fragmented consciousness. So you don't have the monad, you don't have the memory of who you are anymore. So you rely on something else to host you back into those cycles. This is why it's important to hold love in our hearts, even for the ones that are, we consider fragmented because they've gone astray and they need a way back. So if we can host them back, then we have more of God, source, consciousness in our matrix. So anyway, this is the midpoint, the turnaround point after the manifestation. We're meant to go back, collect our Mahayana imprint, our template, put it together, transfiguration, aka ascension, continue to ascend, accrete frequency, reach point zero, and back to the innermost domain, back to source. But we get stuck here instead. We get stuck here in cycles that seem never-ending, cycles of reincarnation, suffering, pain, old age, sickness, illness, everything, you name it. These cycles of creation are linked to the Yuga cycles. Again, watch the Yuga cycles with all its parts, I think 3 parts to it, on our YouTube channel. But what you need to know is that each level of consciousness, the world will appear different. These go in cycles. There's a cycle when humanity is farthest from God's source. It corresponds to the Kali Yuga. Then there's a golden age, an age of illumination, when everyone is just at the level of and frequency of love and unity. But then there's higher than that. There's a Buddhic nirvana stages, awakened stages. That's there. We live in the golden age when we're breatharians. We love each other unconditionally. We honor each other. And that's the true golden age. That's what is referred to as Eden, or the Garden of Eden, closest to the inner say. As we evolve out, aka expansion, we lose connection with the inner domains. Right now, but we're not meant to, by the way. So right now we're awakening to our true Christic nature, returning to the Christ fields at D13, which through the Amaria buffer field, we're beginning to bridge the gap between our frequency and the next ecosystem. This phase of returning is composed of many stages, which I won't go into detail right now, but they're known as starseed, starborn, starflame, starburst. These are all reformations of the Rasha Aya, Rasha Leia, Rasha Lay, and Rasha Lay, Rasha Li and Rasha Lay. At the end, the fifth cycle, we go into the Starfire point cycle. This is the Akashic cycles when the Akashic cycles of expansions are done. As I've mentioned before, a Christ star body doesn't just lose itself when it returns to source. Everything that was part of eternal life comes back. It holds an imprint, it comes back. And this imprint will self-regenerate once again, but there'll be another form, but still holding that encryption of the previous lives. It's done before that. So in essence, continuous cycles of Rasha bodies are the building blocks of eternal life systems. This is why it's important to come to Earth and manifest in physical form, because this is where everything converges. This is where we perceive solid manifestation. It's important to know all the levels, all the different forms. But like I said, this is just the turnaround, midpoint. We are at the end of this Kali Yuga age because of what's happening in terms of activations, pushing our prana seed for compactions, artificially inducing compactions and prana seeds. We have the choice to either activate our Rasha bodies and return into the Adashi cycle through the Adashi temples, ride the Christic ascension cycle, a wave, or be taken down, phase locked, and be taken down by the artificial finite life templates and timelines. This is something many traditions knew and still do. Example, Vedic tradition teaches that, but teaches it differently. They don't teach the yoga cycles in terms of how we're teaching them and learning them in the freedom teachings. They teach it in terms of like times, in terms of linear progression. You go through and then you come out unscathed, and then you collect more awareness, and then you go. It's like, yeah, very different. So there is, like I said, no difference between matter and non-matter. It's all from the same source. It's just one's solid, one's not solid. So in the Vedic tradition, I just want to mention that they teach renunciation. They call the person that renounces the world a sadhu. I'm not suggesting it's a good idea, but in truth, that's they're trying to teach the right thing, is to encourage us to renounce the world of matter. CD in freedom teaching refers to the middle world. That's the detachment phase from the material to the spiritual and metaphysical. Except Christics, us freedom teaching, the ones that follow freedom teachings, we don't teach detachment. We teach integration. So integrating ego, mind, body, emotions, everything. So yeah, the Yuna state refers to the core domain which one has reached ultimate liberation and complete merging with source. This is the field of the Yuna say, hence the word Yuna means the inner domain. These are also states of matter and consciousness. The Sita state refers to the outer. In Jainism, for instance, Sata means the vanity of pleasures. This is the farthest point away from source. This corresponds to the Kali Yuga, commonly known as the dark or as the age of darkness and suffering. So in essence, they're all trying to teach the same thing, but then the message gets twisted and people take it literally. That's the thing. Now, what happens to those people who want to remain here in Kali Yuga, in the age of darkness, in suffering, that don't want to do anything about themselves to activate, to DNA braiding and any of that? They're not interested. Those who resist eternal life because they have no control over others, therefore do not participate in the Adashi return cycle. Those ones are the ones that don't ride back into space dust. They remain in the phase-locked system with no connection to perpetual life. They reassemble their pieces and they go into space dust. If we hold a deep memory of who they are at some point, we can help them return into the Bio-regensis. However, they have to complete certain cycles first. Because once these gates of assistance of hosting have closed, then they have to wait for the next cycle of stellar activation to open up so they can be, upgrade the DNA to go through these dimensional levels. As a consequence of their actions and the decisions they've made, energetically speaking, they can't ride the Christic spiral because of that frequency disparity they created in their DNA. And this is not a harsh system, this is a merciful system. Even the ones that have caused the most amount of damage, one day will be able to reassemble their pieces back and go home, even from space dust. They can do that. There's always free will. Okay, so I think that's it. Covered the 5 stages. Now, before I end my video, I want to summarize the main points of creation because I think that's going to help reinforce this concept into the mind. So first is light-born cycle, the birth of the Taran. Partiki 1 and 2 are born. This has to do with the void and what comes out of the void from God. So 1, light-born cycle. 2, star-born cycle has to do with the Partiki seed atom, the Rosetta, the Taran 1 to 9 layers, and the tachyon cycle. You know those 12 flashes? That's the tachyon cycle. The life-born is number 3. This has to do with the elementals, the Partiki body, the 5 density levels, the 4 sheaths, the Rasha body, the dark matter, the crystal core, the 15 gelesic layers and spheres that become bands and orbs, and the crystal set power generators, the elemental commands, and the 5 elements and the Eron. Then number 4 is the God-born cycle. This is the Big Bang, the dark matter, here working towards the Eucharista body, the big module of consciousness with God, the God worlds. This stage has to do with the birth of the Risha Amore, the 7 inner suns, the 7 outer suns, and the Son of God, the 15th. Then the last one is the Christ or Christ-born cycle. This is the Son of God, body of the Christ is born, and the Adashi return cycle begins. This is linked to Kali Yuga, end of cycle, and the turnaround point back to source. Now we have to remember one very, very, very key thing here is that everything, every atom, every energy unit intelligently comes together with other units in a certain way right from the beginning to form morphogenetic fields. So morphogenetic fields govern everything. They govern the form of matter, manifestation, and evolution of biology and consciousness. Morphogenetic field mechanics thus hold the key to mastery of the physical reality and biospiritual evolution. In essence, we live in a universe built on electromagnetic structures within structures within structures. I'm not sure if it's, they say it's gravity, but it's electromagnetic structures. It's cyclical. Everything's supposed to be in balance. Every action generates an equal balancing reaction, not an opposite reaction. This is wrong. We're not working in opposites here. We're working to balance each other. Feminine, masculine, electromagnetism. So, yeah, that's the summary. Now, reaching the end of the segment, I would like to offer tips as I normally do, and solutions, and also I want to make an exciting announcement. So yeah, I want to say I'm grateful to you for staying with me to this point. I know we're bordering on 1 hour and 40 minutes, but I'll just give me another 5 minutes. So I'm going to make an announcement, very, very exciting announcement, and I'm going to give you a few tips to take home. I know how incredibly complex these concepts are. I myself took a long time to wrap my head around them. But I like to mention my beautiful husband, Matt, and what he has done. He's produced a amazing, wonderful, beautiful piece of work. It's a meditation, and I think he's going to upload it this week. It's called I Am Eternal Life. And I invite you to practice this meditation to get a real feel of that eternal portion of yourself. Because to me, this meditation took me places. It was amazing. Sometimes it's a little hard, to feel our eternal nature because of how plugged into the matrix we are. And this meditation can really switch things on for you. It can take you places. So listen to it as many times as you like. And if you are in a position to make a small donation, please consider a small contribution. Even a very small contribution, it will greatly help us with our work because, we spend a lot of time. We actually dedicate at least 5 full days a week to do this work. The editing, the background work, that takes a very, very long time. It's so labor intensive, time consuming, and we're happy to do it. It's just sometimes it's nice if there's an exchange, because then that just boosts our confidence, and it helps us to get out there and buy more tools that are going to help us, because setting up for this podcast takes many hours to try and align everything, and and then the editing, and then it requires time, energy, a lot of tools and equipments, which we simply cannot do without these videos. So Matt does all that, thank God, because I'm definitely not equipped and to do that side of things. Okay, so now the exciting news, and I sense this will be happily received. So Matt and I have been a little bit quiet the last few months because we're working on something. We're producing a guidebook, a journal, and it's a Christic journal. It's 2-in-1. It's in electronic format, but the purpose of doing this is to give you something, a tool that's going to help provide full guidance through the radial body techniques, the inner technologies, the flame body activations, because these techniques are the inner works. They help restore the original layers, the codings or the original templates. They integrate shadow bodies and disengage from manipulation, raise frequency, take you to the next level of evolution. We're producing this journal, so we're in the halfway in, I think. There's another month at least work. This will be a great tool, I sense, for all of you out there who are serious to activate and to ascend, because it really helps to avoid confusion and overwhelm with the techniques. As you know, they can be quite complex sometimes to understand them in order and what comes first. So this journal / guidance book is going to help you do that. You flow through it beautifully and easily without, doubts and stuff. And the online sessions will eventually come online too, but for now I thought the guidance book is what we feel people need the most. Besides, it's a lot more economical, and really you work at your own pace, and it's so well designed. So this guidebook journal can help clear a lot of confusion and provide light on the sequences, which sometimes can be a bit of a grey area. Now, these techniques, as many of you know, were given in the Freedom Teachings to activate the light body for the next level of evolution. We're calling it Home is Calling. Home is Calling Journal and Guide. This book will include many useful tools. It will include a sample study plan, exercise boxes, inspirational quotes from my book as well, and diagrams, and all HD color codes. So we're hoping that this will be available as a download for purchase by the 2nd or 3rd week of December. So before the end of the year, you should have it. All the activations and everything will commence, if you like, at the beginning of the next year. So, good time to sort of say, okay, I've been playing around a little bit, but now I'm serious about my work. So the start of the year is when things are going to be serious for me. Anyway, it's there. You can purchase it at any time, but this is a good time to sort of begin if you're still on the fence. It will come with PDFs and resources you need, and all the manuals to begin to continue your journal of growth and expansion back home. So keep a lookout for this. Obviously, we'll announce it on all our social media outlets, channels, Facebook, Telegram, and when it becomes available, you'll be able to simply purchase it, download it, print it, put it in a folder, and start using it. Okay. Again, thank you so much. Thank you. So grateful for you all being here with us, for your love, for your support, your kind words, always in comments on our YouTube videos. But this is all from me today. Wishing you all a blessed month, a very joyful journey, and stay connected with your Christ, your inner sanctum, always, forever. Much love.
This is a Kathara Grid. Now, most people, I think even the new people, have seen something about the Kathara Grid through Kathara 1 and those kind of things. I'm not going to read all of these things other than to point out here, because we are going to talk about the encryption. This stuff will all be published, and this one is published in K23 manual, I believe. But what I want to show here is the structure of the Kathara Grid in relation to encryption. When we talk about in a little bit the creation of the first PartikA and then the second PartikA, and we talk about it holding the encryption. The CRIST encryption. The CRIST code encryption is a mathematical program that is literally based upon what is called a base 12 system. It has 12 core radiation points that form in specific angles in relation to each other, and it is through that core program or core encryption of Jalesic radiation units within the first PartikA that the entire mathematical program of the CRIST, of creation, is set in motion. It is from that program that the entire structure of what is first the spirit body, and then the Rasha body, and then the light body and the matter body evolve from. And finally, what I just said there, as far as then and then and then, that has to do with the new chart and the sequence that we are finally given to show how all of these parts get together to the point where we can understand how we have 4 yugas and 3 Adashi return cycles and all these anatomy parts and where they go with each other and what to do with them. So it all starts with the crystal code that is imbued within the form of the Kathara Grid. The Kathara Grid is also known as the real tree of life. There is several mutated versions of these out in various different texts. Some of them I think are in the Kabbalah, and they are shaped different. If you see a Kathara Grid that is shaped different, if it is thinner, if it has some of these balls pulled down, if its numbers are upside down, if it has different number of these, that is part of the mutated coding. So if you guys see any teachings that are using any type of Kathara Grid structure that is not this shape, it implies that the information they were given was not given in the crystal code. So there are little things that you can look for in like when you're exploring other people's work. Because one of the things we always teach you to do is we say, oh, don't read that, oh, don't read that, they're bad guys, they're bad guys. We'll say, well, from our perspective, yes, they are teaching anti-Christic stuff, but there's some fascinating things in there, and it won't hurt you to learn what they're teaching. So we don't tell you not to go to other people's workshops. We say, go ahead and ask some good questions, right? Hopefully we give you enough information where you can really be an irritant, actually, if you want it to be. Or you're going to say, yeah, but what about that 12-point Kathara Grid? Like, what are you talking about? Right? Because a lot of times people are teaching other paradigms. They don't have this entire paradigm that you will see here. And, sorry. They're teaching you parts of things that don't connect together, and if you saw how they connect together and put it next to this, you'd realize it doesn't work. There's just not a coherence in the paradigms as there is in this. So anyway, we just wanted you to know, start with the Kathara Grid like we always do, and we'll go to the next one, please, and the encryption, the crystal code encryption. Now from that Kathara Grid, I wanted to point out here early on that from the Kathara Grid, we first get the exact proportions and rates of expansion. This is called the rotational expansion, and again, you're taking the Kathara Grids, and it's called the 9-12 alignment that actually gives you the rate of expansion, not only of spirals of energy that come out from the center later that you will see, but also of the proportions of the spheres around the Kathara Grids that form, the spheres within spheres within spheres. So there's a precise set of proportions of spherical shapes, how much quantum they will have, and what kind of spiral they create. A spiral of spark currents that come out and feed creation, and a spiral of spark currents going back that allow for a backflow return to source. That is one of the biggest differences between a Christic and a non-Christic program. Christic things teach you that there is source gave the gift of life or energy and its consciousness out into manifestation, and it did it in a way with a crystal code that allows for spark generation from that energy that was given, that allows for a backflow to source, and then source sends another backflow return out. So if you're out in creation, you give back to source, and source gives backflow return, and that keeps an eternal life flow between manifest state and non-manifest state. And when you change that, which means if you change the proportions of any of this, of what is called the crystal spiral, when you change the proportions of the Kathara Grids or the crystal spiral, it shuts down the backflow ability. So it also shuts down the backflow return ability, and you progressively become in more and more of a finite system because you cannot get the natural circulation of energies going. When we've taught before, we've taught Merkaba mechanics, which are part of the light body structure on the outside of creation. If you do not have one spiral of a set that is going clockwise and the other going counterclockwise, you have what is called a phase-locked system. That is what the other paradigms are teaching right now, with specific spin rates, 34, 21, and several like that, that are implying a phase-locked grid that cannot circulate natural energies through backflow and backflow return. Those particular twisted teachings are based on what is called the Fibonacci sequence, or the fib of no chi sequence, as we like to call it, because it doesn't have chi. Chi is a form of prana, by the way. We'll get into that later. When you see this spiral, this crystal spiral, no, it is built on the rotational proportions of the Kathara Grids, and that also the spheres are built on that specifically, so you can tell what sphere is big, how big compared to what sphere when we get into the structures of the spirit and the light body. But it also shows you the natural crystal spiral, and when you compare that, which we will do tomorrow, you'll see this next to what's called the fib of no chi spiral. The one biggest noticeable difference is the fib of no chi spiral doesn't have a relationship with its own center, which is weird. It actually, because it's a suction spiral, where it actually has to stick onto something else and suck its energy from there. And what it does is it tries to take natural creations that are sending natural flow currents out and flow currents back. It tries to take those currents and bend them and hijack them or harness them. So when you see this structure, it is the natural crystal spiral. This one would be on what is called the Ettore side, which is the clockwise spinning, outward moving spiral. This one that emerges at the same time is running in what is called the Adore side, which is the counterclockwise moving inward spiral. So there is a natural ebb and flow of moving inward and outward between source and manifestation, source and manifestation. Next one, please.